baseball's an insanely long season. It's 162 games, I think, in a
all
season.
year round,
so it's
right?
like you got to just be hot at the right time, right? Like, are you hot going into the playoffs? The Jays aren't that hot right now, but they could become hot tomorrow, you know? So it's like you got to hit that streak.
And that's why I've always appreciated hockey, because I just think hockey is the most unpredictable sport in terms of result. Like, it's the only American sport where a team has come down from a 3-0 deficit, you know?
Reverse sweep, yeah.
Yeah, you just don't know.
You rarely see it happen still, but I guess it's possible. You think hockey is the most unpredictable?
I think so. Compared to basketball, basketball's been very consistent when it comes to certain logic. Because when you play like 7 times, you really get to see what team's superior in most cases.
Yeah, but hockey series are 7 games as well.
Yeah, so looking side by side, you can kind of see many more instances of a team with let's say, an inferior regular season record go over or the seeding, for example. The seeding results have less weight than, for example, in the NBA. If you're the first seed, you're probably getting to the conference final. In NHL, the guarantee is much less statistically backed, I would argue. Without even looking at the numbers, I've seen that happen in enough examples to feel confident all throughout. I mean, the ice is much more unpredictable than, the hard court. It really is.
Yeah, we'll have to get a True North hockey party going, and we'll see what happens.
We're gonna get into sports reporting. I'm sorry, but I feel like there's more stories in sports than meets the eye. Like, I'm telling you,
I'm always on the beat looking for politically motivated sports stories. That they happen definitely, but obviously the hockey season's about to start again, so we'll see what comes of that.
But it'd be great to get like a designated kind of sports show that we start to put out or something like that, because I think we have, a lot of our audience wants to hear about these types of things. And like the only thing we're really covering was like the trends in women's sports angle. And so it'd be nice to dig a little deeper into that.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm always open to it, but I think the stories are too sporadic. It's like hard to do it on a weekly basis, because it's like,
that's true.
Obviously, the Hockey Canada stuff is crazy story, but it's like that's like an anomaly, right? Not the norm. My name's Isaac Lamoureux. I'm here with my True North colleagues, Walid Tamtam and Geoff Knight. Let's hop into that first story right away. So yeah, just for our first story, we obviously have a pretty big one that touches close to home for a lot of us at True North, because any older fans of the organization and of the shows will remember, of course, former True North journalist Lindsay Shepherd, who is, of course, married to our managing editor, Cosmin Jurja, who, by the way, had no role in pitching, editing, assigning anything to do with this article. But the big news came out there that Shepherd was fired for telling the truth. I mean, absolute insanity. I don't know how else to word it. She was fired for telling the truth in a tweet by John Rustad there, because she tweeted on Truth and Reconciliation Day. I'll just read the tweet. The orange shirt and the orange flag perpetuate untruths about Canadian history, such as the grandest lie of all, that 215 children's graves were unearthed in Kamloops. It is a disgrace that this fake flag flies in front of the provincial parliament buildings, and it is a disgrace to see the shirt of lies framed prominently and permanently beside the coat of arms, so that locals and tourists cannot view our insignia without having their eyes drawn and redirected to the orange shirt. So this was deemed unacceptable, I guess, by Rustad. As I know, or as I understand, Shepherd faced very minimal backlash against this. The CBC wrote a hit piece on her, basically, but I think it was actually authored by a chief who was married to an NDP MLA in BC, so surprise, surprise. And then 2 NDP MLAs in BC, I think that's it. 2 people apparently talked bad about Lindsay, saying that she should be fired, and that's all it took for Rustad to fire her for, again, telling truths. I mean, this is absolutely insane, and it gets worse because, of course, Lindsay said she's a mother of 2 children and 32 weeks pregnant, so she was about to go on maternity leave, and then Rustad shows her the door. So yeah, if either of you guys want to answer, I mean, what is the irony here where we're talking about Truth and Reconciliation Day? That's the title of this so-called holiday. And then Shepherd is fired from the BC Conservative Party for telling the truth. I mean, literally, it's insane to me.
I think he kind of hit the... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Walid.
I think the lack of backlash is actually a sign that, frankly, Rustad's move is a very poor one in terms of a reward. I mean, because I think, frankly, the reason why there might be a lack of media coverage, specifically from more liberal-oriented or mainstream media, would be the fact is they don't want to give credit to Rustad for being politically correct. I guess that's maybe the case here, because essentially here you have a very, low level, because again, not many people were paying attention to what this individual was tweeting, but of course there's always going to be a few progressive exceptions of people that will be looking for every opportunity to snap on to a narrative that, conservatives are hateful, and then the staffer is leading this campaign to say this and that. I just think it's, if the media is not covering that much, if there's not that much talk about it, then I guess the potential impact of him shielding his image to a certain audience is it's not really there. He's not getting the reward. He's not getting the daytime news coverage that's kind of showing him that he doesn't tolerate whatever it is that he's firing Lindsay for. So I guess this is the challenging of the mainstream narrative in this case, which I'm surprised that the BC Conservative Party is so strong on upholding to the point of squashing internal dissent. But off to you, Geoff.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it just seems like there's probably a lot of conversations happening behind the scenes that we're not privy to, right? And because it's, like you said, it's very confusing as to why the BC Conservatives would push this. And like Isaac said, especially, with the name Truth and Reconciliation, and now so much of the focus of the day is on a falsehood that is basically designed to separate the First Nations communities with I guess European descent Canadians. And I think a lot of people are seeing that and being like, well, what's the roadmap to actually getting to a place of reconciliation? Because so much of the efforts seem to be just in dividing us and really being like, well, look how horrible we were to First Nations. And it just doesn't seem to me to be a path that's going to create unity and create, there's been a lot of great things Canada's done with First Nations, like, like the establishment of Nunavut, which happened within my lifetime. And I would love for the focus to be on some more positive stories like that, the type of things that could bring Canadians together, rather than, here we are still 4 years out from the Kamloops story, and people still believe it. People still think it's true, despite the fact that there's been years of research into it and millions of dollars spent, and they haven't found any bodies. True North has put out a whole has published a book on this called Grave Error that has all the facts laid out for people. So I encourage anyone who doesn't really know too much of the details to check that book out. Because right now what we're seeing is just a lot of effort put into the feelings around the emotional impact around that story that it had on people. And so many people did have such a strong emotional impact to it that now we're finding out that it's not necessarily accurate. It's very hard to let go of those feelings, I think. And it's something we definitely need to do as a nation. Yeah,
well, just jumping on that, Geoff, it is something we're sort of doing. Well, and this covers a few things, because Walid was talking there about mainstream coverage a bit, and this may be why it's not as prevalent as we've seen, because a recent Leger poll showed that only 44% of Canadians, so less than the majority, want more government action on reconciliation. So Canadians are kind of turning away from that. And this was, of course, compared to 88% who wanted the government to improve on healthcare, and 86% who wanted the Liberals to work on the cost of living. So obviously, while Canadians are caring less about reconciliation, they care more about things that are really affecting their lives, which is unsurprisingly healthcare and the cost of living. But just touching on the book there, Geoff, that you mentioned, Grave Error, of course, published by True North. Recently, the Toronto Star published an op-ed with various false claims about True North. This was an op-ed written by Michelle Good, who she advocated for a federal ban on residential school denialism in a book that she wrote called Five Little Indians. And she said various things about Grave Error that were just not true. Like one thing that would take 2 seconds to disprove. She claimed it was self-published, which is not true, obviously. True North helped publish the book, so it's not self-published. There was a lot of things in there that she claimed weren't I mean, look, grave error is essentially a research study. There's 800 footnotes in the book. It's all research based. It's all cited information. It's not fictional in any way, shape, or form. It's essentially a detailed research study, in my opinion. So to refute the research is, I mean, to use a word that the left loves to use, anti-science. Really, you're saying, oh, yeah, it's anti-science, because it's like, oh, yeah, I don't trust your research. It's like, what don't you trust from the 800 citations in the footnotes? What do you mean? It's not really trust when we're talking about facts here. And of course, the book had grave error. It's kind of a multi-author book. Because there was 13 authors, including retired judge, lawyers, journalists, and university professors across several disciplines. So, yeah, were either of you guys surprised that the Toronto Star published an op-ed ironically claiming that grave error was full of lies when the op-ed itself was?
I mean, no, it's kind of like part of the course for Toronto Star at this point, right? To just be very hard-headed about it, and it's funny that there's no repercussions for them to kind of be pushing forward lies and stuff like that, but they're very adamant that people who would suggest that the Kamloops thing wasn't true face like criminal prosecution or outright firing from their jobs or anything like that, and it all seems very ironic to me.
Yeah, and Tom Flanagan, who of course co-edited the book, he told us that the author of this op-ed didn't even reach out to him for comments. So not exactly journalism there. And we know that Leah Gazin, the NDP MLA, she wanted to have that bill to criminalize residential school denialism. So essentially, who knows what would have happened if that bill passed, because what does that mean? You're telling the truth, and you go to jail for telling the truth. We're seeing other similar bills be debated in Parliament right now, essentially about online censorship, the Online Harms Act, which could criminalize people for telling the truth. We're seeing what's happening in the UK. People are going to jail for tweets and Facebook posts. I mean, it's absolute insanity.
Or for just liking the Facebook posts.
It sounds like Leah Gazan and perhaps other progressive NDPers that supported that whole bill with trying to criminalize, what they call genocide denial in the case of the Indigenous peoples in Canada. It sounds to me that that's a path for a book ban. And I know they've been screaming about, free speech and book bans because they want, essentially, pornography, graphic pornography on children's books to be in libraries, because otherwise, if premiers are moving to change laws and change regulations to remove those books from libraries, well, then they're banning books and they're censoring. This is the traditional medieval censorship, banning of books. I guess that would be a path to ban a book like the ones that True North have produced. So definitely very concerning to me if we continue that in that path, whether digital or even physical material to be potentially criminalized because of its content of argument or content of nature. It's insane.
Yeah, and we obviously talked at length over the last several months, I guess, about the book ban in Alberta and the whole controversy there. But moving to a different Alberta story, this one about pipelines. Alberta is leading the way on getting a pipeline to BC. And there's to be fair, it's not as simple as you might think. There's a lot of controversy already around this, because essentially Alberta is just starting an advisory group to get this thing to the starting line, because they're saying that, look, private investors, private companies are not going to put money forward with the federal regulatory hurdles and burdens in place because, take your pick of past billions of dollars of loss by private industry because of anti-energy laws like Bill C-69, Bill C-48, the tanker ban. The list is lengthy, but essentially Alberta is going to do some consultations on this pipeline, kind of get all the details, and then pitch it to the new federal major projects office. And they're hoping to get that application done by spring 2026. So Smith was, I have to say, I watched the press conference in its entirety, and one of the first things I noticed was, I was like, Smith looks elated, really. She was very joyful, which is surprising. I don't know. She's a lot more hopeful that this project will succeed, I think, just based on her even analyzing her emotions and how she was presenting herself than I would be, especially because BC NDP Premier David Eby, the very same day, was saying that we're not going to do this. And to be fair, his press conference, which I think you watched, Walid, was filled with lies, pretty much. He was saying that taxpayers are going to pay for this. But I was in the media briefing with the Alberta energy officials and watched the press conference, and they repeated over and over and over and over again, in no way, shape, or form will taxpayers be paying for this. They're just trying to get it to that office. Alberta has announced $14 million for the application, so taxpayers are paying for it in a sense. But I mean, for the actual pipeline, they're just trying to essentially get it to the major federal office there that does the projects, and then taxpayers will not be on the hook for it because they expect private investors to step in once it gets to that stage. And in fact, Smith said that she expects this project to be on the list, the second wave of projects that Carney's expected to announce in November there at the Grey Cup. And then I'll just give a few data points that are interesting, because while we're talking about pipelines, of course, I referenced earlier failed projects a few minutes ago, and some of them include Energy East, Northern Gateway, Keystone XL. Smith said Canada's GDP would be $55 billion higher every single year if these projects went forward. So if the federal government didn't get in the way on these projects, our GDP would be $55 billion higher every single year. And then energy officials in the media briefing, they said that $11.5 billion of capital has moved from Canada to the US over the last 3 months. 3 months, $11.5 billion. It's insane, because unsurprisingly, US President Donald Trump is making a positive investment environment where projects can be pitched and built and progress quickly, whereas in Canada, it takes years. But I guess I'll start with you, Walid, because you kind of watched Eby here. Yeah, do you think Smith was right to be enthusiastic, I guess, about this project going forward? Or do you think that it may not even make it to the starting line as the Alberta government wants it to?
Well, I'll be very critical on asking these questions when Smith comes to Ottawa this week, upcoming week actually. She'll be here for sure on Tuesday, and I'll be looking at if I can catch up with her and ask her questions about this this triangular dynamic of BC, Alberta, and Ottawa somehow being in between. I actually spoke to Pierre Poilievre, and I got a different question out. But before having my question asked, Poilievre spoke about this issue on the BC-Alberta conflict here, and he's talking about how Ottawa itself should be getting out of the way. Now, in this case, I think Smith, and I'm not sure why, has shown some sort of hopeful feeling after a meeting she had with Carney at some point in time. I think she had her hopes up. I think she's trying to, give some optimism to her base that something will be moving forward. Because look, whether it's Ottawa's fault or her fault, no pipeline means no jobs, means no economic growth. It simply just demoralizes Albertans further. Essentially, where I'm seeing this dynamic of BC versus Alberta, I'm looking at, Ottawa essentially has a referee position in this case. Ottawa leaned towards Alberta because she's been more optimistic. I mean, you remember the whole first ministers meeting back, I think, over the summer in June. You had Abe in Tokyo promoting BC-made chips and snacks in some random grocery store in Japan, while the first ministers, every other premier was meeting with Carney on the round table talking about everything. So I guess what I'm trying to say is somehow Smith might just have a better tone with Carney than even Eby is concerned, and perhaps there might be something there, but for now there is no evidence of that. So I'm going to be catching up with Smith, seeing why she's a bit optimistic about Ottawa recently, even though the track record has been very bad on oil and natural resource investment, and exactly what she's seen from Carney that leads her to believe that Ottawa will have her back when it comes to this specific project proposal of a West Coast pipeline. It has to go through the NDP province.
Yeah, and Geoff, something I forgot to mention about this announcement and this project was Alberta had a lot of focus on the Indigenous aspect of this project, how Indigenous will be co-owners, and they're basically trying to partner with them from the start because essentially this pipeline will have to run through various reserves. So they basically need the Indigenous leaders to approve it, basically, because they could, not just the federal government being a hurdle, but the Indigenous tribes could similarly be a hurdle. So do you think that is cause for concern, Geoff? Because obviously Smith, as I said, was very enthusiastic, and some of the chiefs have already pledged their support for this pipeline. But of course, we don't know the exact route yet, so it's hard to say which tribes will be involved and whether they'll all have to approve it. Do you think that's something that's likely in your eyes?
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly what they're talking about behind the scenes and stuff like that, but it kind of ties into what I was saying before earlier, where, I'd love to see more focus on projects where the Canadian government worked with First Nations to achieve a positive result. And what wouldn't, in my opinion, what would be a more positive result than like making all Canadians a little bit richer, right? Because if whatever your opposition is to the pipeline, if it's like an environmental or one or something like that, if you are richer, if you have more wealth, you can put that wealth towards environmental causes. You can put it towards whatever you believe in that you think is going to strengthen the country and make the world a better place and all that kind of stuff. And also, I know a couple of guys up in the oil pipelines up in like Fort McMurray and stuff like that. And they've shown me pictures of these sites, like once they've laid pipeline and stuff like it. It's like pristine. There's so much red tape that they have to go through to actually get this stuff done, that they can't like leave behind this kind of like, what you'd imagine based off of the way that these things are talked about, like this wasteland of like oil, wildlife, struggling to get out of pools of raw oil and stuff like that. No, it's like this beautiful green scene that's left behind once they're done. So, again, I am always in favor of Canadians being more rich. I'm always in favor of Canadians accomplishing projects that is going to improve our bottom line. And this is good for Canadians. This is good for the Indigenous, the First Nations. So, I know there have historically been a lot of pushback on these types of projects, but I certainly hope that with Danielle Smith's enthusiasm, that indicates that these First Nations groups are on board, and that this can be looked back on as a successful operation between the Canadian government and First Nations groups to, like I said, make all Canadians wealthier.
Yeah, at the root of the environmental concerns, let's say, is a lie, of course, and to be fair, at the root of many left-wing, even most left-wing arguments are lies, because, of course, this oil has to come from somewhere. We have the cleanest oil in the world, so if you build this pipeline, you are helping the world on energy perspective. Emissions will go down, because the alternative is getting coal from China. I mean, what are we talking about, right? So, the oil has to come from somewhere.
Well, the left's like whole MO is kind of being, having grievances and being victims of this or that, right? And so, a lot of their careers are tied in with it as well. So, of course, they're going to keep kind of pushing those types of narratives because it literally puts food on their plates. And that's something that I worry about with the future, whereas, how I was saying earlier, is there going to be an end game to this truth and reconciliation? Like, are we actually going to reconcile at the end of it? And it's hard to kind of see it going in that direction when people are literally making their livings based off of it not going in that direction.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of people would be out of work if these issues were resolved, right? So then you have to keep the issues going. Otherwise, you literally don't have a job or even a career in some senses, especially when it comes to environmentalism.
Yeah, it's like how some people say that, they won't cure cancer because the money's in the treatment rather than the cure, right? It's kind of the same idea here.
Speaking of jobs, we'll move over to the Alberta teachers. I'll try and get through this without getting too angry, but this is absolute insanity coming out of Alberta, because Alberta teachers are going to walk off the job on October 6th after almost 90%, 89.5% of teachers voted against the settlement with Alberta, despite the government not only giving them everything they asked for, but more. I mean, this is absolutely insanity. I can't even I've been going through this for a while, but I just can't even comprehend the level of indoctrination happening with the unions to these teachers, because they all seem to have completely lost the plot. Just getting into what they were offered, I mean, it's insane. So yeah, of course, the Alberta government offered to hire 3,000 new teachers, 1,500 new educational assistants, a 12% wage increase over 4 years, but it's actually a 17% wage increase for more than 95% of the teachers. And the CTF, they've done a really good job breaking it down. They had a Facebook post there, and it kind of broke it down. I mean, look, I'm going off memory because I don't have the post in front of me, but a first year teacher was making like 70 grand. Then less than 10 years, you're up to like 110 grand. The top scale teachers making like 115 grand a year. This is healthcare, defined pension, benefits, summers off. I mean, the list goes on. It's hardly that they're struggling here. And the premier and the officials at the Alberta government were saying this raise would have made them the highest paid teacher in Western Canada, saying, of course, that it's higher than even in BC, where the cost of living is like 5 times higher. So you're getting paid more. And I don't really... it's hard. Yeah. Have you guys been paying attention to the teacher strike? Walid, I know you want to move to Alberta. Have you been looking at that news at all?
Well, I know viewers always see the flag behind my head, but it's typically more of a symbolic gesture from a distance. I'm not really looking at moving to Alberta in the immediate future because honestly, it's such a big move, and 2-hour difference time zone. I think Eastern time is what rules the world, and obviously Ontario still has something interesting about it. But I will say, on the terms of the teacher strikes, I find teacher unions to be some of the most hostile to the public interest unions that we have out there, because they really are just leveraging the fact that they're providing some form of daycare for children, and they're providing some sort of education. That's something that our society values very much. I don't think there's ever been this argument of defunding education at, frankly, any level for at least mainstream society. People really buy into the fact they want to have their kids in schools and public schools for the most part. And I just find the fact that these unions keep asking for more and more money, more and more salary, while leaving our kids behind day after day, because I'm assuming the strike will essentially cease operations. I remember in our school as well, when I was growing up in Ontario, that that meant we lost some of our sports seasons because teachers were complaining about how they were spending an extra hour or two after school without pay to coach that sport or whatever. So I mean, I guess the spirit of volunteerism is kind of gone out of the window there as well. But I find that teacher unions are really just weaponizing the vulnerable situation that parents have, where they just need childcare for the 8 to 2 or 8 to 3, and a little bit before, a little bit after, and then of course hopefully a half decent education. I don't know, maybe this school, maybe it should just contract the drag queens to cover up a bit more, because I mean, that's it's already a big element of education these days. You can't get rid of the drag queen story hour scenes anywhere, let alone even in the most conservative province of Alberta. So it's quite interesting, frankly. But I hope that they can get a resolution to the table, and hopefully, let's just say for the future outlook, we can have a system where the unions have a little bit less power over the public, because it's a little bit too much.
Yeah, Geoff, obviously, it's hard to deny that the unions don't really care about what happens to kids at this point. They're pretty much just being selfish, but the Alberta government does, and in fact will provide $150 per week to students with, to parents of students with, that being students aged 12 or less that go to public, separate, or francophone schools and are affected by the strike. And then they also, the Alberta government, they released a parent toolkit in both French and English. So it's basically just online learning because it will go through the curriculum for them. So what do you think of the package that the Alberta government's giving here? Is it enough? And I mean, unsurprisingly, the teachers and the union aren't doing this. The government is literally stepping in to teach kids here. So yeah, what do you think?
I mean, I've got pretty complicated feelings about the teachers union and their relationship with students in general. It seems like over the last few years, there's this weird culture of secrecy between parents and teachers. As for whether the money is enough or not, I mean, I think the real issue for parents is going to be daycare for having, now they have to take care of these kids who can't be left at home alone. And a lot of parents aren't able to be home all day. So I don't think $150 a week does cover daycare. From what I've heard, daycare expenses are quite high. And so I think this is going to create a financial issue for a lot of parents for sure.
Yeah, and just getting into a few more things, you touched on one of them, but the premier did say that the province is spending $8.6 billion in new school construction to build 130 new schools, which would add 200,000 spaces for students by 2030. Because, look, the issue here is obvious. There's way too many people immigrating to Alberta. Smith said that over the last 3 years, 80,000 new students. So this is the problem. The teachers are complaining that their classes are too big. Well, it's like, what do you think caused that? It's not from Albertans having children. We've seen the birth rates. It definitely is not that. It's because people are immigrating here, not just from other countries and continents, but from Canada, because Alberta has led the country in interprovincial migration time and again, because our cost of living is so low and you can actually make money here that can, you can live with. And then I don't know if I said this, but again, the agreements that the unions denied, like they were literally accepted among the Alberta Teachers Association and the TEBA. I mean, I don't understand this at all. They got everything they asked for, and then the teachers voted against it. So like I said, the indoctrination going on, I can't imagine what it is. But look, some of the teachers are really close to figuring out what the real problem is, because they're talking about how overflowed their classrooms are. And it's like, I don't think it's funding that's the issue here. I think it's the fact that 100,000 kids came in 3 years. That's what Smith said. Look, you can't build new schools out of thin air. They don't just appear out of nowhere. Even when you're investing billions into them, which the province is, it takes time to build schools, obviously. You can't just 3D print a school. That's what we need, eh? If you could 3D print schools, we wouldn't have this problem, hey guys?
Yeah. There's such a focus on how we need so much more immigration to like replace our dwindling population, I guess, as it ages, but no focus on if we actually have the facilities able to support this many people coming in, which we clearly don't. So it's kind of a mess in more areas than just the school system, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, we always focus on that with healthcare, but then we forget about, the schools are overflowing too. Well, surprise, surprise, especially when we have some families coming in here where they don't have, they're from countries without birth rates of 1.2 or whatever ours is, and they have actually 8 kids, and it's like, where do you think school, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it was back in my class when I was in frankly, from the 6th to the 8th grade, so my end of my elementary school career is when we had about 5 students. And this was back in this was after the war in Afghanistan. So this was at around the time when we were receiving a lot of Afghan refugees in Canada. 5 kids came up in just into my class from 24 the previous year to about almost 30, adding 2 exchange students from Colombia as well. So it's a very interesting situation where we see the population growth, even in areas where there haven't been that massive population growth. I mean, I feel like there's been probably greater rates of mass migration in Canada's other major cities and urban areas besides just the east end of Ottawa, where I was at the time. But when you're seeing classrooms get to the size 30, 31, 32 kids, with the same amount of teachers, same amount of resources, same amount of textbooks, and you're having to share more and more across the table. We also had I think we had a total of about 14 or 15 portable classrooms on the outdoors, because we had displaced some of the younger kids, 3, 4, 5th, 6th grade, and put them in portables so that we had more classroom space because of that increase of size as well. So, I wasn't personally that much against the portables. I kind of think it was a pretty good idea in terms of expanding a school without having to build a new one. But with 14, 15 different portables, it kind of becomes a bit of an absurd scene where a lot of what was formerly outdoor yard space for us to play and get active and play tag now became a bunch of these, buildings propped onto the ground, and the whole school becomes a mess when that many kids. It's not meant to be a university. It's meant to be an elementary school to serve its local community, not meant to serve the globe, unfortunately. Although, of course, immigration is a big part of our legacy, I just think we've gone beyond the means of what we can afford.
Well beyond. And yeah, I mean, look, we'll see how long this strike lasts for. I'm generally in favor of privatizing everything. It's not so simple with schools, especially elementary schools and stuff. It's a topic we could probably talk for hours alone on. But instead of doing that, I think it's best to just wrap up the show. And remember, everything you heard today was off the record.
I was there yesterday morning on the hill on the outside. I got in past Parliament security when they stopped me for a few minutes, and then former colleague MP Andrew Lawton helped me up the stairs so I can get past that blockade of the potential censorship, frankly. But anyhow, not to be petty about it, because all the guys were pretty nice with me, and as per usual, I asked the question at the Pierre's press conference that was on originally crime. The question I asked was his stance on the canola tariff the canola China EV tariff situation. Now, I've heard that he's vouched for support to support the government, to support the farmers, help them brace the period of time that they have to deal with these China tariffs, and effectively when China's not going to be purchasing nearly as much canola. You see big losses in their very key industry, and that industry is primarily key in the West. So you're talking about Saskatchewan, Alberta, even Manitoba and British Columbia. And so, of course, those premiers were advocating. And Premier Scott Moe, actually, over the course of the summer, was talking about, urging the government to drop those EV tariffs because, well, in his view at the time, if we're going all on this EV game and we're tariffing these EVs that could possibly serve at the marketplace, while also, causing some strain with our relationship with Beijing to the point where we wouldn't be able to be selling our canola, well, then it seems like an easy trade-off. Now, since September, I think mid last month, he changed his posture on that scenario. He kind of explained how it was a bit more complicated than what he previously thought. So I guess he's adjusted his tone. Smith as well previously held the same view as Moe, where she felt that those tariffs should be dropped on Chinese EVs, allowing China to flood the market with cheap EVs like BYD and their models. Very cheap devices, by the way, of course, because they have a completely unfair practice of business. And I guess I wanted to know what Poilievre's stance was on first of all, the EV tariffs themselves, but then hear about what he had to say on trade. And he told me that he wouldn't want to drop the EV tariffs, that he would look for alternative means to support canola farmers, but he just went on this rampage on Carney's trade record where he just said that Carney should lock himself in a room somewhere in Ottawa and not leave and not travel, not because he has an issue with the travel, but because he has an issue with the result. Every time he gets on a plane, he went to London or the UK twice, and the marketplace is still blockaded from Canadian meat production. He went to Europe and he got all these, MOIs, no real deal, no real legally binding deal. So wherever he travels, it seems that his results, according to Poilievre, are lackluster at best. So I guess Poilievre's message is to ground the plane, stay at home, and better nothing than what he's been giving thus far.
Yeah, every time he travels too, he gives hundreds of millions to some foreign agency or government. That's where we're at in Canada. No prime minister, literally, if we had no prime minister, we'd be better off than with the one we do have, which every time he leaves the office basically puts us in a worse position than we were in, which is essentially what Poilievre was saying there.